So today we're going to be talking about stage green. Stage green is the one that comes immediately after stage orange. It's a communally focused stage, and it arises from the direct consequences of stage orange with regard to how orange destroys the environment, how orange creates economic inequality, and generally the inherent selflessness and short sightedness of orange culture. Green is created from that. Green is based around the idea that everyone is equal and that a society should be based on giving everyone equal opportunity no matter who they are, no matter what their social status. They all have equal opportunity and should be supported and loved no matter what their situation. Um, Stage green is commonly associated with liberals. In the United States, I'd actually say that liberals lean more toward orange, but they do have quite a bit of green these days. I'd say that liberals generally are like two-thirds orange, one-third green. Um, so, what are the aspects of green? So the first aspect of green is social justice. Social justice is basically what I was just talking about, that all races are equal no matter what, and if a race has been mistreated, then it is to be given compensation. You hear the term social justice be used quite a lot all among liberal circles. It's exceedingly common. The next facet is environment. The environment is something to be protected at any and all costs. Um, uh, that the environment is what sustains the earth, what sustains humanity, and the more you damage the environment, the more you create climate change, which is something that we're currently going through, as a matter of fact. So, stage green is all about protecting the environment, living in the environment. The next facet is peace. Um, so peace means you should never do war under any circumstances. War does nothing but create destruction and hurt people, according to stage green. According to green, war has no practical value, and it's something that is to be removed at any and all costs. Peace is something to be upheld, and green is extremely conscious of the dangers of modern technology, such as nuclear weapons, and the understanding that if war goes too far, nuclear weapons can potentially destroy the entire world, humanity included. So that's another motivation for why green is so oriented against war. The next facet is egalitarianism. So, by that, it means a society that is based around complete equality, complete freedom for people to have their say in government. The government is of the people and by the people. It's no longer made just of laws. Green does have laws, of course. It's built atop a blue foundation, among others. Um, but laws are no longer the main focus within green, not like they were in blue. Within stage green, um, it's whatever is best for the entire community. So, everyone gets voting rights no matter what. More access to people having more say in what the government does is better. The more people who vote, the more times people vote, the more ways that people can vote, the more ways that people can have a say in what their government does. Um, so it's egalitarian and democratic. And it's with egalitarianism comes social welfare. So, that the government exists to support the people and serve the people, not the other way around. Whereas in blue, blue thought that the people should serve the government. Green is the other way around. With green, the government should serve the people, and the way they make that work is having the government be completely by the people. Um, so the people elect the government serves the people, and it goes around in that circle. Um, the people make the government supports the people, and so forth. Um, so the next facet is relativism, and relativism is another thing that feeds back into social justice, because with relativism, it's all about who has the most relative to who else, who is way far above the norm for the society, and if someone is above the norm for the society, then that person needs to give some back to the community because they have too much. The community, everyone should have uh, close to the same. There is there is a progression within green. People are allowed to move up uh, in hierarchies, but the hierarchies are all truncated. No one is ever allowed to have too much power. So green is extremely conscious of who has what relative to who else. And if someone has far too many resources too far above the norm, then green is going to take issue with that. Um, the next facet is pluralism, and by that I mean cultural pluralism. And what that means is it's a celebration of all cultures across the world. All cultures are given validity no matter what their situation, no matter what their history was, what their ethnicity is, and so on and so forth. Green is very much obsessed with culture, with studying culture, experiencing culture, foreign languages. Everyone should know foreign languages in a green culture. Green really loves that. It'll take issue with people if they only speak one language. Um, the next facet is universal reconciliation, which basically means no punishment. If someone commits a crime, the way you handle that is you don't send them to jail. Instead, what you do is you try to help the person. So you send them into some social program where that program shows that person how to reintegrate with society and become a functional member of it, regardless of what they did. Green is completely and totally forgiving. Um, so there's no capital punishment. Green sees capital punishment and punishment in general, jails and so forth, as being completely dysfunctional, which really they are. When people on the street commit crimes because they need to survive, Stage Blue will put them in jail and it will punish them. And it will make them feel even more miserable than they were, make their lives harder. Then, when that person is released from jail, uh, they go right back to what they were doing before because their survival situation hasn't changed. And they may even need to go even more into stage red because their life has been complicated by the fact that they couldn't make money while in jail. Um, and also that they can't find a job because they now have a record and, assorted other things. So, Green takes issue with that whole system. Green doesn't like that way of doing things at all, and Green just wants to get the person integrated with society, give the person what they actually need to become a functional member of society. It's not the person's responsibility to get themselves in shape, it's the responsibility of the society to help the person. This is how Green sees things, Green's perspective. The next facet is education. Green wants everyone to be as educated as possible, to know as many things as possible. This is not to be confused with Stage Yellow. Stage Yellow is the one after this, and Stage Yellow also is knowledge focused, but it goes about things in quite a different way, so I don't want to confuse Green's knowledge with Yellow's knowledge because they're really different things. With the way that Green perceives knowledge, Green is all about the education system. It's whatever whatever is in the books, whatever has already been proven. Um, there's nothing too far out there. There's nothing too radical or too in the clouds. With green, it's all about classes and real science. Green is very much into science. Both green and orange are very into conventional science, but they have different focuses. With orange, it's more about non-living thing-based science. Orange is all about the numbers, it's all about being cold and practical, whereas with green, it's more about the social aspect, social science. How does the experiment affect the world? But green, even with green, there's still trouble thinking outside the box. There's no Einsteins in green. That doesn't happen until yellow and onward. Um, so with green science, it's still very much inside the box. It's more tolerant of new ideas than orange, of course, but there are limitations. And if you get too far outside the education system, then green's going to take issue with that. Um, the next facet for green is relationships. Um, so um, green is all about bonding with people. It's all about the community, having friends, supporting your friends, having social networks, not just for business, but just for people to get to know each other. Green sees it as the responsibility to have social networks. Well, the neurotypical aspect of green, autistic people go about green differently, but since this channel is directed at the world and most people are neurotypical, I'm talking about neurotypical green. um, with neurotypical green, it's a very social manifestation of green. It's all about relationships and networking and forming a community, using social media to build the community. Who is in contact with who's supporting who. Um, if a relationship is having trouble, then everyone should help with the relationship. Everyone should get counseling from everyone else to help with all their relationships. It's a very supportive thing, very loving. Um, the next facet is sensitivity. Green is very concerned with feelings. It's concerned with going very deeply into what you feel in the soul. Trying to uh, uh, bond with the feelings of others. Being feminine is something that's very permitted in green, and green encourages this. Green tends to discourage masculinity in most aspects. Um, Green, let's see, feminism is something that feeds into this. Feminism movements are something that are very heavily green. Virtually all feminist movements are in stage green. Celebrating the female, giving the female compensation for the hardships done to them trying to live in a male world. Everyone should feel sorry for the female. I'm not trying to sound like I disagree with this. I think it's a good idea. I'm just mentioning this is Green's perspective. Um, and The next facet is openness. So it's green openness. It's not the openness of things that are like super radical. I mean, in the New Age hippie movement, which is like the very heart of green, of course, you can have very radical, very open-minded stuff. But like in the orange leaning green in the U.S., open-mindedness is basically just generally the need to come up with new ideas, new ways of doing things. Um, and of course, with Democratic Party green, it's not super open minded. It's not the radical stuff just yet, but there's various different degrees and gradations to green. So like what I would call deep green or full green, which is the New Age hippies movement, ultra spiritual. Um, you know, uh, Using LSD and weed and so forth to get the mind as open as it possibly can be, DMT. that kind of stuff. That is where the openness really comes into play. The super radical ideas. But there's this book about let's see, it's one I read a while ago in college. It's called How the Hippies Saved Physics. I forget who wrote it, but I'm sure you can look it up. But it is very interesting. It's about the role of the hippie movement in the development of quantum mechanics in the 60s and 70s is very interesting. Yeah, I forget who wrote it, but if you just look up the title, How the Hippies Saved Physics, I'm sure you can find the rest of the info on the book. But that's just an example of the green applications of science, although I think the hippies described in that book were yellow leaning. They were quite far out there, even as hippies are concerned, but still, you get the idea. Um, so the next facet is self-expression. Self-expression basically means everyone is able to be who they really are, wear whatever they want, make themselves look however they want, no uniforms, no required dress like Blue did, that women are no longer required to wear dresses, men are no longer required to wear pants, and anyone can make themselves look however they want. Um, Everyone is encouraged to be as expressive as possible so they can be their true self. Um, the next facet is spirituality. Green is very spiritual, not in any religious sense. The way that Green does religion, it's very open-minded and not religion in the conventional sense. It's like there's no doctrines. It's more just a celebration of life, a celebration of like looking into the soul. Um, a lot of uh, Eastern traditions, like from Buddhism, Hinduism, that kind of stuff. That was something that was explored in the hippie movement, and that's been carried over into modern green. So there's a lot of the spiritual practices from that's been integrated. Also, green has rediscovered a lot of purple cultures, such as the Native Americans, and looked at the way that they've done spirituality, and green has started to integrate a lot of the stuff that the Native Americans were doing, how they were spiritual. So green is trying to it's sort of like a snowball with regard to spirituality. It just wants to glob up everything and try to experience everything with spirituality as much as it possibly can. Um, uh, yeah, so those are the aspects of stage green. Um, so now we're done with the aspects. So how does green sustain itself? Well, green sustain itself, as you probably guessed, through maintaining a strong government with democracy where everyone in the government is held accountable, elections are held frequently, and everyone is given as much access to participating in the election in as many ways as possible as they possibly can. Um, so there's very high taxes, but at the same time, a great deal of welfare. Everyone is taken care of, but at the same time, those that make money have to put a lot back into the system so the system can sustain itself. So there's sacrifices. It's not like in Orange where everything is trickle down economics. There's no one at the bottom rungs who gets left out. Everyone has a role in Stage Green. Um, the society nature of green is it's very trusting. It's um, how green is set up is um, businesses they're all integrated into the society itself, and usually the way it works is that when someone starts a business, either they sort of build off things that already exist, or they they work with the government services to make something new, and if they make something new, then um, the society is going to make sure that everything about the business works with the society, so that there's sort of like an ecosystem of business. You can think of sort of like an ecosystem of business. At the same time, there's real nature ecosystems, because green is extremely big about nature. So there's trees everywhere and forests everywhere, and free parks, free national landmarks. Once green really starts to take hold in the coming decades, national parks are going to blossom, and they're going to take over much more area than they did. There's going to be a lot more put in. Um, there's a lot more focus on the environment. It's everyone cares for everyone else. You receive from the system, you put back in the system what you received, and so on. Um, the constructive aspects of green, of which there are a great many, constructively speaking, green is um, it's a very happy place to live. Like the Nordic countries, which right now are the main green hubs in the world. Green is like the leading edge of the stages. The green centered people are like about 10% of the global population, the upper 10%. Um, and so there's not that many green societies, and right now the Nordic countries are the main societies that are really truly green. So Norway, Sweden, Denmark, um, I think Finland, um, those countries. I may be forgetting a few, but you have the general area, the general region of the world in your head. Um, and as I mentioned, everyone trusts the government. Everyone has free access to most stuff in the government, um, or actually nearly all the stuff in the government. And everyone is educated. What one common culture in places like Denmark and Sweden is, you have people who are privately very wealthy, but they don't flaunt it, and it's because they don't need to, because most of those people became wealthy just by being part of the society. Of course, they made sure to nurture their own skills and become value, because even in green, there's still hierarchies. So in general, the more competent you are, the more worth you have to the society, and what you can do, the more you'll make. But the difference in income from that is nowhere near as pronounced as it was in orange. Um, so it's much easier for people to become wealthy in green. Um, but uh, even those who are very wealthy, they don't flaunt it. They keep it very privately, like in, I think it's Swedish culture. It's either Norway or Sweden, or maybe both, possibly Switzerland as well, where um, people, the only way you'd actually know they're wealthy is by actually going into their house and seeing all the expensive stuff they have. And they just keep it privately, because there's no flaunting. They're all part of a community. There's no need to advertise yourself being too far above the norm, because green's going to take issue with that. Um, so the destructive aspects of green is that, as I mentioned before, when people actually do try to go too far above the norm, they're discouraged from doing so. Um, so, people with outrageously useful skills might actually get attacked by green, because green, it doesn't want that person becoming too successful, and it's worried that the person will take too much from the community if they're allowed to use their skills too much. So they don't want the person to become too wealthy. So people are generally discouraged. Like, you could go a little bit above the mean, like maybe one standard deviation or two, but you can't do much more beyond that. because otherwise green's really going to get on your case, and they're going to think you're trying to be orange. And green arose from learning everything that was wrong with how orange does things. Green thinks of itself as being incorruptible, so it doesn't. It's afraid of people trying to do orange, or even people who might look like orange, because it'll confuse yellow for orange all the time. uh, Yellows who are systemic thinkers trying to do stuff super outside the box. Green usually won't understand, or not usually, but oftentimes won't understand, and it'll mistake them for someone trying to be a stage orange hedge fund genius or something, and it'll overreact. Um, Green doesn't understand tough love very well. Um, it doesn't understand that sometimes you actually need a little bit of the nature mentality, not too much. I think nurture is generally better than nature in most cases, but sometimes you do need nature, because sometimes people need to learn how to be tough. They need to learn how to stand up for themselves is really important. And green doesn't really understand that, because green is all about the community, feelings, celebrating the feminine. Um, try to promote itself as being incorruptible because it believes in those things. So it doesn't like the idea of tough love, and uh, it always pulls the plug on tough love really quickly. You're being too hard on that child. You've gone way too far. You need to stop it. Stuff like that. Um, and also green generally, as governments go, they're not terribly efficient. Like once a green society really gets going, it's a very wonderful place to live. But things tend to happen slowly in a green culture, generally speaking. There's not the rapid innovation that there was in orange. It's more about things unfolding slowly and organically. And because of that, green is not one to take the initiative. As the stages go, green is probably, but green and purple would be the absolute worst for taking initiative. Actually, purple is even worse. But purple can take thousands of years to take initiative, if that. Green, green's a little bit quicker than that, but still, I think you get the idea. And you can see the lack of efficiency in green, just like with movements like Occupy Wall Street, where there were a lot of people involved in it, but they didn't really have a clear goal for what they wanted to get done. And and also the hippie movement. That's another example where it was everyone rioting and protesting for getting rid of the Vietnam War and stuff, in the hippie movement, getting rid of the war. But despite their efforts, conservative politicians still ended up getting elected, because the hippies were oftentimes just really slow to actually take initiative. Um, they weren't very organized. That's one thing about green. As social movements go, it tends to have very poor organization, generally speaking. Once a society is really developed in green, they're much better about organization. Like the Nordic countries generally are rather well organized, but when it starts out as loose movements like the hippies and Occupy Wall Street, those tend to be like diffuse masses where there's no clear, definite goal. It's just a bunch of people who want things that roughly correlate with each other. And because of that, it's hard to get direct legislation passed. And you can see this in what's going on today, that even though the center of our country is now green leaning, it's ahead of orange. Still, orange and blue policies have a lot more chance of getting passed, just because those stages are much better at taking initiative, being efficient, and using the system, whereas green is just sort of like behaving like an amorphous mass, can't get itself organized. Um, that's a very definite drawback of green. And with the efficiency thing, that's the main thing about it that leads to the graduation of it to stage yellow. Um, so yellow is what yellow arises as a general desire to see things get done in a large scale, concrete sense. Um, Yellow is focused with fixing everything that's wrong with the world, going at it like an engineer, but unlike in orange, where it's no longer about serving yourself, it's now about trying to fix the world. Um, and also just generally about trying to experience the magnificence of reality. Um, and all that arises just from the drawbacks of green, from the desperate desire to see things get done, and also yellow becomes aware of the necessity of tough love. Um, then the understanding that sometimes you actually need stage red, sometimes you do need war, because sometimes you actually do have to fight for yourself or for your country. Um, so there's a general understanding and a want to really know things that leads to the graduation from green to yellow. So yeah, that's it for stage green. And the next episode will be yellow and the second tier.